Quan let out a gentle sigh, feeling the chilly breeze carrying the damp scent of the mountains and forests. He stood on the small balcony of the wooden house he had rented, gazing out into the distance. Before his eyes stretched endless green coffee hills, vast black pepper plantations, and stilt houses peeking out from under ancient tree canopies. As a young researcher in ethnic culture, Quan harbored an insatiable curiosity and a deep passion for discovering traditional beauty and stories hidden within the hearts of lesser-known communities. His trip to Gia Lai this time wasn't just to gather material for his thesis, but also to explore the unique beliefs and customs of the local ethnic minorities. A gentle knock broke the silence. Quan smiled as he saw the landlady, a kind Gia Lai woman, bringing him a steaming cup of tea. "You're up early, Quan?" she asked warmly. "Here's some hot tea to warm your stomach." Quan accepted the cup, the warmth spreading through his hands and chasing away some of the morning chill. "Thank you. The scenery here is so beautiful. I couldn't sleep," he said, his eyes still fixed on the forested hills. "Ma'am, I've heard that this place has some very special traditions, especially about ancient charms and talismans. Could you tell me a bit about them?" he asked, his voice filled with curiosity. The landlady smiled, a gentle but mysterious smile. "Ah, you're from the city, so you probably don't believe in such things. But around here, we believe in the power of the mountains, the forest, and our ancestors. And yes, even charms and talismans," she said calmly. Quan looked intrigued. "I'd really love to learn. Could you tell me about a particular charm you know?" The landlady paused for a moment, then spoke. "There's a type of charm known as a love-binding talisman. It's made from special materials found in the forest and is enchanted with ancient incantations. People believe that if used correctly, it can bind two people in love forever." Her voice was soft, but it sent a chill down Quan's spine. He furrowed his brow. "That sounds strange. What happens if it's used incorrectly?" She sighed, her eyes staring distantly out the window. "If it's used the wrong way, or if the enchantment is broken, it will turn against the one who made or used it, and the consequences are unpredictable." Her voice dropped, tinged with sadness. Quan felt another chill crawl down his back. Though a rational thinker, tales of charms and spells always held a strange allure for him. "So, do you know anyone who's ever used one?" She shook her head. "It happened a long time ago. People don't talk about it anymore. But Quan, it's best not to get curious about such things. Some things are better left untouched." Her voice carried a warning. Quan nodded, though his curiosity only grew stronger. He knew the landlady meant well, but with his explorer's spirit, he couldn't ignore a story so compelling. In the following days, Quan spent his time traveling through the villages, taking photos and recording notes on the lives of the ethnic people. He met elders and listened to their folktales, forest legends, and stories of charms and spirits. The more he learned, the more he felt the spiritual world here was rich and deeply mysterious. One afternoon, while walking along a narrow forest trail, Quan suddenly heard a strange rustling in the bushes. The sound was faint, like leaves brushing together, but enough to make him jump. He looked toward the bushes, his eyes alert. "Who's there?" he called. No answer, only the sound of the wind weaving through the leaves. Slowly, Quan approached. He pushed the branches aside, and a surprising sight unfolded before him. A small, long-abandoned shrine, built from stone and covered in moss. It stood quietly before a massive banyan tree whose roots clung tightly to the rocky wall. A shiver ran through Quan's body. The shrine looked ancient and shrouded in mystery. "An old shrine," he exclaimed, his voice filled with excitement. "There's definitely something special here." He stepped into the shrine's courtyard. The air turned noticeably colder, and a faint scent of incense lingered. Inside, a small altar had collapsed, and shattered statues lay scattered. On the walls, faded red ink symbols depicted strange markings, characters Quan had never seen before. He circled the shrine carefully, observing every detail. Near the altar, something on the ground caught his eye, a decayed wooden box. Partially rotted, Quan bent down and picked it up. It was surprisingly light, and he could feel something inside. Slowly, he opened it. Inside lay a small black object, a charm, made of old fabric embroidered with symbols similar to those on the wall. Though torn and worn, its shape was still discernible. Another cold wave ran down his spine. This charm, it resembled exactly what the landlady had described as a love-binding talisman. He felt an inexplicable urge to touch it. Slowly, he reached out and placed his fingers on it. Instantly, a freezing surge shot into his palm. Pain gripped his hand as if something was crushing it. Shocked, Quan pulled away. The charm fell to the ground with a soft thud in the still air. At that moment, a cold gust swept through, and every candle in the shrine, if any remained, was extinguished. Darkness swallowed the room entirely. "What is this?" Quan cried out, panicked. His heart pounded against his chest. He tried to turn on his phone's flashlight, but there was no signal. No power. In the darkness, a faint sound echoed. Laughter, high-pitched and icy, as if from the depths of hell. "Who's there?" Quan stammered. The laughter grew louder, now as if someone were whispering right into his ear. Then, a raspy, haunting voice echoed through the shrine. "You have awakened me?" Quan felt the blood in his body freeze. He realized, with chilling certainty, that he had made a terrible mistake. This journey to Gia Lai, his curiosity about mystical things, it had all led him to a place he should never have come. This abandoned shrine was not just an ancient relic, it was the dwelling of a dark and dangerous spirit. "You have awakened me." The raspy, whispering voice echoed through the thick darkness of the shrine, freezing the blood in Quan's veins. He knew he had made a terrible mistake. This trip to Gia Lai, driven by curiosity and a thirst for the mystical, had brought him to a place he was never meant to find. This abandoned shrine wasn't just an ancient architectural relic, it was the dwelling place of a terrifying spiritual force. In the pitch dark, the high-pitched laughter and haunting voice numbed all of Quan's senses. His heart pounded violently, his chest tightening as if crushed. The air turned icy cold, not the usual chill of the forest night, but a bone-deep, death-scented cold that reeked of mildew and decay. "What is this?" Quan cried out, his voice trembling. He tried to back away, only to feel as if an invisible wall blocked his path. Trying to steady himself, Quan took a deep breath and said, "Stay calm, I have to find a way out of here." His voice tried to sound firm, though inside he was shaking uncontrollably. "But it's too dark. I can't see a thing," he whimpered, groping blindly around him. The laughter returned, closer this time, as though someone was standing right beside him. Then, a loud crash echoed from the shrine's doorway, like something heavy had collapsed. Startled, Quan instinctively backed into a corner. He fumbled for the flashlight on his phone again. This time, the dim beam flickered to life. The faint light swept over the room, revealing a scene of chaos. The altar had completely collapsed. The statues shattered further, and on the floor, the red ink markings seemed darker, more defined. The small charm he had touched still lay there, now darker, radiating an icy aura. "Let's go," Quan urged himself, stepping out of the shrine without a moment's hesitation. He moved quickly, each step deliberate and cautious. The forest trail now felt unnaturally long. Every creak of wooden planks, every gust of wind through broken windows made him jump. As he passed the giant banyan tree, Quan suddenly felt eyes staring at him. He turned around, and in the dim flashlight glow, he saw a white figure glide past the tree trunk. It lasted only a split second but was enough to send a chill down his spine. He rubbed his eyes, telling himself it was just his imagination. "Did you see something, Quan?" His own voice echoed in his mind, a whisper born of fear. He shook his head and said aloud, "Nothing, let's just keep moving." But the sensation of being followed refused to leave. He felt a cold presence surrounding him, as if someone was whispering incoherently into his ear. At last, he reached the familiar dirt path. The daylight, though still foggy, was enough to slightly ease the dread gripping his chest. "Thank God, I made it out." Quan exhaled deeply and sank onto a rock. He looked back at the shrine, eyes clouded with thought. This isn't just a coincidence. That charm, someone's disturbed it. Quan looked at the palm of his hand. The icy sensation still lingered. He didn't know what to do, throw it away and risk something worse, or keep it and live with the fear. What now? He muttered anxiously. He decided to leave the shrine immediately, walking back alone on the forest trail. No one said a word to him, because there was no one else. The air felt heavier now, stripped of the enthusiasm and excitement he'd felt at the start of his journey. On the way home, Quan was overcome by a strange fatigue. His head buzzed, and it felt like an invisible weight was pressing down on his shoulders. He knew that charm had brought something back with him. By the time he returned to the wooden cabin, dusk had fallen. The once familiar room now felt different, almost like someone else was inside. Even though he knew it was empty, he turned on the light. The dim yellow glow pushed back some of the darkness, but not the unease creeping inside him. He took a shower, hoping to wash away the discomfort, but as he stepped out of the bathroom, a faint rustling sound came from his backpack. Quan turned to look. The backpack was still there, but it had moved slightly, as if something had just touched it. A chill ran down his spine. He knew this wasn't his imagination. Something had followed him home. He sat on the bed, trying to calm himself. "It's just stress," he whispered. But then, another sound rang out, this time from the window. A soft, steady knocking. He held his breath and stared at the window. No one was there, only the dark, silent night and the sound of wind rustling through the leaves. The knocking returned, louder. His heart raced. Something was wrong. He slowly walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. Outside, there was nothing, just the empty path and the dim street lights. Relieved, he sighed. Maybe I'm just being paranoid." He returned to bed, trying to sleep, but then, a whisper echoed softly in his ear. "You cannot escape me." Quan jolted upright. That voice, it was the same voice he'd heard in the shrine. He looked around the room but saw nothing. He turned on every light, desperate to chase away the shadows and fear. He now understood. That trip to the abandoned shrine hadn't been a simple exploration. It had opened a door to another realm, one he never believed was real. And now, he was entangled in it. He glanced at his backpack. He knew the charm was still in there. It glowed faintly, almost calling to him. Quan felt an urge to touch it again, to uncover its secrets, but he pulled his hand back. He knew now, his life would never be the same again. That cursed charm had begun to haunt him. "You cannot escape me." The chilling whisper echoed in Quan's ears, jolting him upright from bed. The small wooden rental cabin suddenly felt more suffocating than ever. The dim yellow light did little to chase away the invisible darkness that seemed to engulf his mind. Quan glanced nervously around the room, his eyes darting from corner to corner, searching for any sign of a presence. But there was nothing, only a terrifying silence and the pounding of his heart in his chest. He tried to breathe deeply, reminding himself that he was just stressed and exhausted from the journey. Yet the unnerving sensation refused to leave him. He got out of bed, his feet met the cold wooden floor, the chill climbing up his legs. He walked to his backpack where the charm still lay. He was certain it was glowing faintly, eerily, even if he couldn't see it. The symbols on the charm seemed to dance before his eyes, as if they had come to life. He felt a strange compulsion to throw it away, but then, an invisible fear gripped him, holding him back. The next morning, Quan awoke with dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't been able to sleep a single moment that night. The images of the abandoned shrine, the shrill laughter, the haunting voice, and the mysterious charm haunted his mind like a never-ending loop. He felt a weight pressing on his chest, like an invisible stone crushing him. He reached for his phone, intending to call someone, but stopped. Who could he even talk to about this? He decided instead to go out for breakfast as usual, hoping that returning to his daily routine might help him forget the events of the night before. At the breakfast stall, the landlady looked at him with concern. "Are you all right, Quan? I heard strange noises from your room last night," she asked, her voice tired but caring. Quan sighed and responded, "I'm fine. Ma'am, probably just sleepwalking. He tried to mask what he was really going through. He didn't want to make her worry anymore, especially after she had already warned him. The landlady frowned. Sleepwalking? You don't look well. Maybe you should take a rest. He shook his head. I'm okay. Really? Just a bit tired. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. Do you know anyone around here who's knowledgeable about old charms and talismans? I'd like to learn more. She paused for a moment, then answered. There's an old man who lives in Stone Village. He's the most knowledgeable when it comes to spiritual matters and ancient charms of our people. But he rarely interacts with strangers. Quan felt a spark of hope. Where is Stone Village? Can I go there? The landlady shook her head. It's far away, and the path is difficult. Fog covers it all year round, and strange things are known to happen there. Not many people dare go. Quan nodded. That's all right, ma'am. I'll do my best to get there. It's the only way now. After breakfast, he began preparing for the trip to Stone Village. He packed his camera gear, notebook, and some food supplies. The cold of Gia Lai still lingered, and thick fog limited visibility. He trekked through the mountainous forest, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The birds chirping, the sound of a brook trickling, and the rustling leaves created a serene forest symphony. After hours of walking, fatigue set in. He stopped and looked around. The fog was still thick, and nothing was visible except towering ancient trees. God, I'm exhausted, he murmured, sitting on a large rock. He checked the map on his phone, but there was no signal. A sense of unease rose in his chest. Looks like I'm lost, he said, his voice tinged with worry. Suddenly, a strange rustling came from a nearby bush. It sounded like leaves brushing against each other, faint, but enough to startle him. He looked toward the bush, eyes wary. Who's there? He called. No answer, just the wind whispering through the leaves. Cautiously, Quan stepped closer. He pushed the foliage aside, and unexpectedly found a narrow trail leading deeper into the forest. This path wasn't on his map. A chill ran down his spine. This path, there was something mysterious about it. A strange trail. He whispered thoughtfully. I wonder where it leads. He paused to think. Taking this path could be dangerous, but it might also be his only chance to reach Stone Village. Let's go, he said firmly. I don't have any other choice. He stepped onto the narrow trail, walking carefully. The path wound deep into the woods, the thick fog cloaking everything, limiting his view. The deeper he went, the colder the air became. A strange scent, like wilted jasmine, lingered faintly around him. A heavy pressure settled on his chest, as if an invisible force was trying to pull him downward. Quan felt the blood in his veins freeze. He knew that the spirit was still here, still watching him, and it was waiting for him at the end of this road. The whisper, "You have arrived," echoed endlessly in his ears, making each of his steps along the unfamiliar path heavier and more burdensome. The fog was so thick that he could only faintly make out the ancient tree trunks on either side. And the scent of withered jasmine grew stronger with every step. Like a ghostly invitation, he took a deep breath and spoke aloud. Come on, Quan, you're almost there. That old man is your only hope. He muttered to himself, trying to sound steady, though terror was rising like a tide inside him. He continued walking, each step deliberate and cautious. The path narrowed even more, flanked by dense bushes whose branches tangled together, forming a shadowy tunnel. Sunlight could no longer pierce the fog and thick canopy, plunging everything into a gloomy, bone-chilling darkness. Suddenly, a strange sound came from ahead. It was like footsteps, soft, but enough to make Quan startle. He froze in place, holding his breath to listen. Who's there? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. There was no reply, only the rustling of leaves in the wind and the thunder of his own heartbeat in his chest. Then, a faint black figure swept past in front of him, so quickly that it looked like a fleeting shadow at the edge of his vision. He rubbed his eyes, trying to see more clearly, but there was nothing. Did you see something, Quan? His own voice echoed in his mind, like a question born from fear. He shook his head. I'm not sure. Maybe I imagined it. He tried to calm himself. though he didn't truly believe his own words. He kept walking, but the feeling of being watched only grew more intense. He felt as if someone were walking just behind him, and every time he turned around, he saw a fleeting silhouette at the far end of the path, barely visible through the mist. After some time, the narrow trail suddenly opened up into a vast clearing. Before him was a small village, hidden in the dense fog. The old wooden houses were clustered close together, and thin trails of smoke drifted lazily through the air. "Stone Village," Quan exclaimed, his voice filled with relief. "I made it." He let out a deep sigh. He knew he had overcome one trial, but he also knew this was only the beginning. He stepped into the village. It was eerily quiet, not a soul in sight. The old wooden houses appeared deserted, and the air carried a strange scent of damp earth, decaying wood, and a stronger than ever trace of wilted jasmine. Quan walked along the main road of the village, trying to find the old person the landlady had mentioned. He passed houses with closed doors, long, narrow alleys, and gardens overgrown with wildflowers. At last, he found a small house at the edge of the village. It was surrounded by a bamboo fence, and in front was a small garden full of flowers. The air held a familiar incense scent, but now it carried a heavy, ominous undertone. "This is it," Quan said and stepped into the yard. An elderly woman with silver-white hair sat on the porch, knitting. Her face was kind, but her eyes were deep, so deep it felt like they could see through everything. "Hello, ma'am," Quan said respectfully. "I came looking for you. I have something I need your help with." The old woman looked up and stared directly at him. Her gaze was sharp, as if slicing through his soul. A shiver ran down his spine. "I know why you've come," she said, her voice warm but laced with mystery. "You have awakened something that should have stayed asleep." Quan's heart pounded. She knew everything. "Please, help me," he said, voice trembling. "I'm being haunted by a spirit. I can't escape it." She looked at him, then sighed. "The mark it left on you is strong. That spirit won't let you go easily." Despair settled over him. "So, there's no way out?" She shook her head. "There is a way, but you must agree to a condition." Quan quickly asked, "What is it?" "I'll do anything." She stared at him, eyes thoughtful. "You must face your greatest fear. You must enter the world of spirits, and break the bond yourself." His blood turned cold. Enter the world of spirits? What did that even mean? "But, how could I possibly do that?" he asked, voice unsteady. The old woman smiled, an enigmatic smile. "I will help you, but you must walk the path on your own. Do you dare?" He took a deep breath. "I do," he said. She nodded. "Good. Then tonight, we begin." A chill ran through him again. He knew a new journey, dangerous and uncertain, was about to begin. And he didn't know if he'd return. As night fell, Stone Village was swallowed in silence. The fog thickened more than ever, blanketing everything in a mystical shroud. The old woman led Quan to a small room at the back of her house. The room was dark, lit only by a flickering oil lamp. The scent of incense was overpowering, sacred and mysterious. "Sit down," she instructed, pointing to a worn mat on the floor. Quan sat, tension overwhelming him. She sat across from him, staring straight into his eyes. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice low and warm. He took a deep breath. "I'm ready, ma'am." She nodded. She brought out a small earthen bowl, filled it with clear water, and gently placed a few dried jasmine petals inside. Then she began chanting an incantation in an ancient language Quan had never heard before. Her voice was steady but carried a strange, magnetic power, as if pulling him into another realm. As she chanted, the jasmine petals began to swirl in the water, and the surface turned murky. Like a thin fog was rising from within. A chill ran down his spine, and his head began to buzz, a light dizziness settling over him. "Look into the bowl," she said gently. "You will see the path into the world of spirits." Quan gazed into the bowl. At first, there was only mist, but gradually, the fog cleared, and an image appeared. It was a narrow, winding trail lined with ancient trees. The path led to an old, crumbling shrine, the very same one where he had found the charm. His heart pounded. He knew this was where he needed to go. "Follow that path," she said, voice steady. You will meet the spirit. You must face it, and sever the bond yourself. He knew he had to go alone. I can do it, Quan said, voice shaking but filled with resolve. She nodded. She reached out and touched his forehead. A wave of freezing cold surged through him, making him shiver. Then, Quan felt his consciousness begin to slip away. He fell into darkness. Thick darkness, no light, no sound. He felt as though he were falling into a bottomless abyss, endless and consuming. The cold enveloped his entire body, and he couldn't move, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. When Quan awoke, he found himself standing in a place both familiar and strange. Towering ancient trees surrounded him, and thick fog blanketed everything. The air was frigid, and a weight pressed down on his chest, as if an invisible force were suffocating the space around him. Quan knew he had entered the spirit world. Ahead lay a narrow winding path through the trees. It led to a crumbling, decrepit shrine, the very shrine where Quan had first discovered the charm. But this time, it looked far more terrifying. The moss-covered walls seemed darker, and the shattered windows resembled hollow eye sockets staring directly at him. A heavy, ominous energy filled the air, making it hard to breathe. Taking a deep breath, Quan stepped through the rusted iron gate and into the shrine's overgrown courtyard. Weeds choked the ground, and the air grew colder than ever. His footsteps echoed in the silence, sharp and jarring, as if slashing through space itself. As Quan approached the entrance, a loud creak echoed from within, like someone slowly opening a door. He knew the spirit was waiting for him. He stepped inside. Darkness swallowed everything. The damp air carried the scent of rotting wood and wet earth. This time, the moldy smell was stronger, mixed with a strange scent, like wilted jasmine and something sour and metallic. Quan tried turning on his phone's flashlight, but it remained dead. The room was completely shrouded in darkness. You have arrived, the raspy, whispering voice echoed again, clearer this time, as if someone was standing right next to him. Quan turned quickly. In the corner of the room, a shadowy figure appeared, vague and ghost-like, slowly drifting toward him. What do you want from me?" Quan asked, his voice trembling but filled with resolve. The shadow didn't respond at first. It stood there motionless, like a statue carved from shadow. Then came that high-pitched laugh, not a whisper this time, but a piercing screech that filled the room, making his ears ring and his head spin. "You woke me," the voice growled again, now laced with hatred, "and now, you will pay." A freezing gust swept through the room, stabbing into Quan's skin like thousands of needles. He felt a cold hand touch his shoulder. Startled, he spun around, but no one was there. Only a whisper brushed his ear. "You cannot escape me." He tried to move but couldn't. It was as if some invisible force pinned him down, squeezing the breath from his lungs. "Let me go," Quan shouted, struggling to resist. Suddenly, an image flashed in his mind, a young woman in traditional Gia Lai clothing, her long hair covering her face. She stood before a grave, clutching a small charm, the same kind Quan had touched. Her face was racked with grief and despair, her eyes red from crying. Quan gasped. This woman, she was the spirit haunting him. What do you want from me?" he asked, voice shaking. The shadow said nothing. Then, the raspy voice echoed again. "You took everything from me." It clicked. The spirit didn't just want revenge, it wanted back what had been lost. But what exactly had been taken? The question lingered in Quan's mind. He inhaled deeply. He had to find out. He reached into his pocket, where the charm still rested. It was as cold and heavy as ever. I'll return it to you," Quan said, his voice firm, "but you have to let me go." Silence. The shadow slowly retreated. The crushing force lifted from Quan's body. He collapsed to the ground, coughing and gasping for breath. He looked at the charm in his hand. It was still there, but it no longer glowed. Slowly, Quan stood and approached the collapsed altar. He looked at the faded symbols on the wall. They now glowed faintly. He held the charm up and looked back at the shadow. It was still there, motionless. Do you want this?" Quan asked softly. The shadow moved forward, reaching out toward the charm. The moment it touched it, a burst of brilliant light exploded from the charm. The room filled with blinding radiance, washing away the shadows, but it wasn't a peaceful light. It was searing, wrenching, filled with sorrow and release. The shadows slowly faded within the light. Then, a new image emerged. The woman with long hair, her face now visible, was smiling softly. Peacefully. "Thank you," the raspy voice returned, no longer vengeful, but calm and filled with gratitude. "I am free?" Her image faded gently into the light. Then the light, too, disappeared. The room fell back into darkness. Quan stood there, alone in the dark. A deep sense of relief filled him. The weight in his heart had vanished. The spirit was free, and he, Quan, had helped her. He looked down at the charm in his hand. It remained there, now inert, just a relic now, a reminder of a perilous journey, and a curse that had been lifted. Suddenly, a frigid gust brushed past him. Quan spun around. In the darkness, a new shape emerged, not the woman. This was something smaller, a childlike silhouette. His heart pounded again. He knew this wasn't the end. In the darkness of the shrine room, a small, blurry figure, resembling a child, slowly approached him. The freezing air wrapped around the space, but this time, it carried a deep sorrow, an eerie emptiness that seeped into every corner. Who are you?" Quan asked, his voice trembling slightly, but no longer in sheer panic. He tried to see more clearly, and in the dim light of his imagination, he saw that it was a little girl, about 7 or 8 years old. Her long hair hung down, covering her face, and she wore a tattered white dress. Though her eyes were hidden, Quan felt them staring straight at him, filled with an unbearable loneliness and despair. The girl remained silent. Then, a soft sobbing sound broke the stillness, quiet, but piercing straight into Quan's heart. It wasn't a cry of anger or resentment. It was the cry of an abandoned, forgotten soul, a pain beyond words that lingered endlessly. A wave of compassion rose in Quan's chest. He realized this child wasn't an enemy. She was a lonely spirit seeking help, seeking comfort. Do you have something to tell me?" Quan asked, his voice now gentler, full of understanding. The girl kept crying. Then, she slowly raised her hand and pointed to a corner of the room. Quan followed her gaze. In that corner lay an old, rotting cradle, discarded on the floor. Beside it was a torn fabric doll, missing one eye. A wave of sorrow surged within him. He understood now. This girl was the daughter of the woman who had been sealed away. She too had died here, in this shrine, left behind, alone and unnoticed. What do you want me to do?" Quan asked, his voice trembling with empathy. The girl continued to cry. Slowly, she moved toward the cradle, sat down beside it, cradled the old doll, and kept crying. The sobs faded like a breeze but became all the more haunting. Quan felt his chest tighten. She was so alone. All she wanted was to be near her mother, to be comforted. He took a deep breath. He knew what he had to do. He walked to her, slowly kneeling beside her. You want to be with your mother, don't you?" Quan asked, his voice soft and full of comfort. The girl lifted her head, her eyes meeting his, though her face was still hazy. Quan felt a flicker of hope glimmer in her eyes. She gave a faint nod, full of longing. Quan smiled, a sorrowful smile. He knew he couldn't bring her back to her mother in this world, but he could help her find peace. He could help her feel alone no more. I'll help you," Quan said firmly. "I'll help you find your mother so you won't be alone anymore." She looked at him, gratitude glowing in her eyes. Then she slowly reached out and touched his hand. A wave of icy energy rushed into him, but this time, it wasn't frightening. It was peaceful, like a final thank you. Suddenly, an image flashed in Quan's mind, a woman with long flowing hair, a calm face. She stood in a garden full of flowers, and beside her was a little girl, laughing joyfully and holding her mother's hand. Quan knew it was the woman and her daughter, alive and happy, and now, they had reunited. They had found eternal peace. Quan smiled. He knew he had done the right thing. He slowly stood up and looked at the girl. She still sat there, holding the old doll, but now, she was no longer crying. Her face, though still faint, showed a gentle smile. You're free now," Quan whispered. The girl gave a soft nod. Then she slowly faded into the darkness, like dust in the wind, leaving behind a sense of lightness and serenity. The room sank into complete stillness. The air felt fresh, and the heavy, oppressive feeling was gone. Quan stood there alone in the dark, overwhelmed with relief. The burden in his heart had lifted. The souls of the woman and her child had found peace. And he, Quan, had helped them. He looked at the charm in his hand. It still lay there, no longer glowing or cold. It was just a keepsake now, a reminder of a perilous journey and a curse broken. Quan slowly stepped out of the room and walked up the stairs. The shrine door had opened on its own, and daylight poured in, illuminating the entire space. The abandoned shrine no longer felt terrifying. It was still old and moss-covered, but the gloom was gone, replaced by a peaceful silence. Quan stepped outside, breathing in the fresh air. Birds chirped cheerfully, and sunlight washed over everything, clearing the morning mist. He looked back at the shrine one last time. He knew this was a memory he would never forget, a journey of danger, a terrifying curse, and the bonds that helped overcome it all. When Quan awoke, he found himself lying on the old mat in the small room of the elderly woman. The landlady was sitting beside him, her face filled with worry. "Quan, you're awake," she exclaimed, her voice full of relief. "You scared me. You were unconscious for quite a while." Quan looked at her, then around the room. The old woman sat across from him, smiling kindly. "You did very well," she said, her voice warm. "You helped that soul find peace." Quan felt immense relief. He knew it was over. He thanked the old woman and the landlady. Then they left Stone Village together. The road back was no longer frightening. The fog had cleared, and sunlight bathed the world. Quan's life returned to normal. He continued his work studying ethnic cultures, exploring new places, but he knew he had changed. He had experienced something extraordinary, something that made him wiser, stronger, and more in tune with the spiritual world. And sometimes, when he looked at the charm in his coat pocket, he remembered the abandoned shrine, the landlady, and the souls that had found freedom. He knew that spiritual stories aren't always frightening. Sometimes, they carry messages of release, of gratitude, and of miracles in life, things the human eye cannot always see. However, one evening, while Quan was writing his thesis, he heard a knock at the door. A gentle, steady knock. He looked outside, but no one was there. He told himself he was just imagining things. Then the knock came again, slightly louder. A chill ran down his spine. This was no illusion. He slowly walked to the door, pulled back the curtain. Outside, there was no one, just a quiet road and dim streetlights. He sighed in relief. Maybe he was just being too sensitive. He returned to his desk. But then, a whisper echoed in his ear. "Have you forgotten me already?" Quan jumped, startled. That voice. It was the one he heard in the shrine. The cursed soul. He looked around the room. No one. He turned on all the lights, trying to chase away the darkness and fear. Quan glanced at the charm on the desk. It no longer glowed, just a souvenir now. But Quan knew that spirit hadn't completely vanished. It was still out there, still watching him, and he knew this was not the end.